And welcome to Let's Talk It's Not Rugby. Yes, that's something we've been hearing quite a lot recently, so I thought I would talk about it. Hello, I am Paul, the man behind DrivingMaul. Thank you very much for joining me. So, let's talk. The reason I'm talking about this is clearly because of the no ruck and offside issue that we had with the England versus Italy game. But it's something we've been hearing quite a bit, and something that came to mind around about sort of Christmas time, when we had the new tackle laws being brought in, and players were going, "It's not rugby. We're not playing tiddlywinks." And that was all around player welfare. Now, I disagree with those law changes because they came mid-season, not because of actually what the law changes were. And I think players will react to them. The game today is not actually rugby. If we were to go back and pull out the original rules, and I had a quick look at them the other day, that the game that came from rugby school, the game would be totally unrecognisable. And it happens to be an anniversary for rugby school, and I think rugby school should put on a charity game using the original laws, and we should have that on TV, and we should have a look at that and understand quite how much the game has changed from what it originally was. The Scrum, it's another one we talk about, don't depower the Scrum. If you go back, and there's been some good videos on Facebook showing you how the Scrum has evolved over time, you'll see that not that long ago the Scrum resembled much more a league Scrum than it did anything you would recognise as a Scrum today. The players aren't pushing that hard, there's definitely no hit, and it has changed. The game changes. So saying something that it's not rugby is pretty false, because the game is constantly evolving, is constantly changing, and it might not be what you expect to see over the moment or over the last couple of years, but that doesn't not make it not rugby. The other charge, and so those sort of comments that have come out in the press and on Facebook saying that not engaging at the ruck and not trying to compete for the ball in that way is not rugby, because it doesn't allow phases, and it isn't. It might not be, as I say, it might be what we've seen over the last couple of years, but that doesn't make it not rugby. And we've seen that from a few of the sort of English celebrities. Yes, I am English as well, so this is not coming from a partisan point of view. The other one that we have talked about is that I've heard a lot about on social media. This is considered this to be a negative tactic, and this is not. So again, this is not rugby because it's a negative tactic, because you're not competing for the ball on the ground. Now, for me, it's not a negative tactic, because the players are getting themselves in a position to either intercept the ball, or if there is a pass, they are in the England backfield and they're closer to make the next tackle and try and turn over the ball in that way. So to try and say this is a negative just because it slows down the pass is I just don't agree with. A lot of players, where you say we actually praise a lot of the forwards if they can get their hand on the ball, if they can slow it coming out of a ruck. This is just slowing it down a different way. That doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just different, and it's competing for the ball in a different way, so it doesn't make it a negative tactic. When the Chiefs use it, we don't call it a negative tactic, but when the Italians do, we do. Now, that's more because when the Italians actually got the ball, they couldn't really do anything with it. They didn't actually play that well. They had a great tactic, and they executed that particular tactic well, but as soon as they got the ball, they dropped it, the pass is not going in hand, and the line-out's missing. So yes, it looks negative in the fact that Italy didn't manage to do anything with the ball once they got it, but the actual thing itself is not negative. The other thing that's been coming out and a lot of people have been talking about is World Rugby suddenly, I'm going to use inverted commas here, looking at changing the laws. Oh, by the way, thank you for those of you guys for watching live. Please feel free to put comments or ask questions through Periscope. If you're watching it on the recording, then please feel free to put it, tweet me back, or put it in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. So the other piece is that World Rugby is looking at changing the laws, and everyone's going, "Oh, this is just a reaction to England." Actually, no, it's not. World Rugby, they go in 4-year cycles around the laws, and so when the Chiefs did this, is this live? Yes, this is live. I'm live here in New Zealand, so please feel free to put comments in. Where was I? Lost it. Yeah, so when the Chiefs did this a couple of years ago in Super Rugby, because of the law cycle changes, they always try and lock the laws down heading into a World Cup. So they couldn't change it then. So as soon as we came out of the Rugby World Cup and we had the experimental laws last year, they put the experiment into different competitions. This is one of the areas that World Rugby was looking at stopping. So they put some experimental laws into the Mitre 10 Cup in New Zealand. That's the provincial sort of championship, the level below Super Rugby. And one of those laws was that you just had to have one player over the ball to start a ruck. Now, as England were doing that, that would have meant in this game we would have had rucks and there would have been an offside line. So for those people who are saying, oh, it's just World Rugby is just doing it as a reaction to England, that's not true. World Rugby have been thinking about putting in a law to stop this kind of thing happening last year as well. They put in a number of laws around the ruck, around how you could enter it, around because at the moment the tackler can get up and just try and pick up the ball, doesn't matter which side he's on. That was also going to be taken out. He had to retreat and come in from his own side as well. Obviously that was a favourite tactic of Richard McCaw. And the conclusion at the end of the Mitre 10 Cup was that actually that the combination of rules were wrong, and they decided to throw, or to not have them again this year. So we will see whether that particular rule comes out. And I say there was a combination of that. A little comment here: clever performance from Italy. If you ask me, you do what you have to do to try and win. Totally agree. But this isn't. I guess the points. Some of the points that I made yesterday were that it's not new. It's been around for a few years, and so players should know, and especially commentators should have seen it before. So those are the points I wanted to cover today. That rugby is constantly evolving. Just because something has changed now doesn't make it not rugby. Watch the game 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years ago. Each time it'll be unrecognisable. It'll be very different, maybe not totally unrecognisable. Even things like Scrum have evolved a lot, and they're not definitely Scrum today is unrecognisable to a number of years ago. You've got to remember, in the old days, New Zealand used to have a front row of 2 men rather than 3, and it's and they had a law in relatively recently that actually fixed what the Scrum would look like, and how many people you had to have at each row. So it does change. So we can't just say it's not rugby. I don't believe it's a negative tactic. I think it's a way of getting hold of the ball and disruptive. I think if you're only killing one person and not really competing at the ruck and trying to get people to stand up in a line, which is a tactic that Saracens and England and many teams have used recently, is that more people in the line mean there are less gaps, which make it easier to make the next tackle and make less space on the field. So is that a negative tactic than actually putting nobody into the ruck? I don't believe so. I think it is just in defence you're trying to get the ball back, and I think this is just another way of doing it, just in a different style. And finally, recapping here, around the law changes. The law changes have been in place since last year, or at least attempts to outlaw this since last year. This isn't purely a reaction to England, even though that a lot of people will see it as that way. So thank you very much for joining me. If you're watching this on Twitter or Periscope, please do share. If you're watching it on YouTube, then please, hey, give us a thumbs up. Also, you can find my link to my newsletter in the title above if you're watching it on Periscope, and on YouTube the link is down below in the notes. So please do sign up for my newsletter so you don't miss any of these ever again. If you want my views on the specific tactic around the ruck and offside, have a check out my video from yesterday where I talked all about that. Thank you very much for joining me. I'll be back tomorrow talking about the Super Rugby predictions. I will then on Thursday I'm planning to talk about Georgia in the Six Nations, something I talked about back in November, but it's come up recently again, so I'll go over that again and how we coordinate them. Thank you everyone for joining me. Catch you tomorrow.